All right, YouTube. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast talking Auburn football. Go ahead and subscribe to Vernon Speak Sports. Auburn, down in the deep south. College football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. Spring football is definitely done at Auburn, and now we move on to the next phase of where Auburn is headed going into the 2023 season. A lot of the more optimistic fans would like to think that this is going to be a 1-year turnaround, kind of similar to the 2013 season and year 2 for Gene Chizik in 2010. However, with the trajectory of where college football is now, that's just not likely. There are a lot of teams that did make some big turnarounds. LSU, for example, I thought made a huge turnaround and, made it to the SEC championship. I think Brian Kelly did an excellent job down there in changing the discipline, changing the trajectory of how they play football. They're very disciplined. I remember watching the Florida State game, and I'm like, man, these guys they look pretty good, actually, considering all the buffoonery that was going on recruiting-wise with LSU going into the season. But, man, those guys actually made a statement in year 1. Now, here's the problem with the situation at Auburn. Auburn hasn't really done a good job recruiting in the last 2 years. You talk about the tumultuous situation with Brian Harsin, and just really didn't put Hugh Freeze in a position to where he could, from a probability standpoint, make this complete turnaround. Now, the main position that's in question, obviously, is the quarterback. Watching the spring game, there's some obvious improvements on the offensive line, but quarterback, wide receiver, that's going to be the most important situation for Auburn, because you're going to have to push the ball vertically down the field. You're absolutely not going to be able to depend on a dual threat quarterback, because that's just not the move now. Linebackers are faster. Defensive linemen are it's just not going to work. You don't fool anybody doing this stuff. And then you can't do the ridiculous hurry up offense, because now there's from a timing standpoint, it errs a little bit more on the side of the defense to make things even, to where you just can't do the ridiculous hurry up that teams were able to do back in the early 2000s. So with that in mind, TJ Finley took to media and said, hey, I feel like this is a slap in the face. Auburn coaches going out and recruiting other quarterbacks, and I'm here. And, well, we got to look at the results. You look at TJ Finley, and now his I'd say his most defining moment, and I think a lot of you all would agree with me, was the comeback from behind win over Georgia State. Bo Nix, his gaming in that day was, it was abysmal. Auburn would not have won that game had Bo Nix finished that game out. TJ Finley comes in, saves the day. Many even thought that week that TJ Finley might have won the starting job, but he didn't. Fast forward to 2022, I thought this would have been a huge moment for TJ Finley to prove himself as the solid starter for Auburn against Penn State. You got Penn State coming to Auburn. Auburn looking for some revenge in that game. Here's TJ Finley. 11 of 19, 152 yards, 1 interception, and was sacked 4 times. You didn't give your team a chance. Auburn lost that game by double digits. San Jose State U, 13 for 20, 167 yards, 2 interceptions. Mercer, the game against Mercer, 9 for 14, 112 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. TJ Finley had one game where he had over 220 something, had over 200 yards, and that was against Houston, and he was still 51.4%. So I asked you, TJ, as much as I like your words, I like, your approach to the game. What do you expect the coach to do? I mean, you talk about a coach that's trying to compete on a high level in the SEC. You can't do that with throwing 2 interceptions against Mercer. You can't do that throwing 2 interceptions against San Jose State. So the biggest thing with TJ Finley has been the consistency factor. And I think all of us can attest to that. So now as we kind of shift gears and look at Auburn's season, 2023 season, if you look at it at first glance, you're looking at maybe a 5-7, 6-6 possibility. Just at first glance, because you're looking at I think a win against UMass. I think a win against Cal. Now the toss-up, one of the toss-up games, Texas A&M. I'm projecting a loss, but that could be one of those toss-up games where Auburn may have a chance. Georgia, I think Georgia's just too talented. LSU is starting to kind of roll a little bit. They're talented as well, obviously. 2 straight national championships. LSU, probably a loss there. Ole Miss win, Mississippi State win. Now, here's the surprise game for me. Vanderbilt, which traditionally gives Auburn trouble, I think that's going to be the game that pushes the envelope to where Auburn could either lose that game, win that game, and put themselves in a position where they can have an 8-game season, as well as Arkansas. I think Arkansas is a team that Auburn traditionally plays well against, especially when they're coached well. They usually have somewhat of an advantage over Arkansas. And then you got New Mexico State. Obvious, I think that's an obvious win. And Alabama, we don't really know. We know they're talented. We don't know their situation at quarterback. And Auburn tends to play well against Alabama at home. So I'm looking at best case scenario, 8-4 for Auburn. Worst case scenario, 6-6. They still make a bowl game. Preferably not the Birmingham Bowl. But year one for Hugh Freeze, especially with the recruiting that he has going from a momentum standpoint, I think that's great on his part. What do you think about this video? Go ahead and like the video, comment, and subscribe. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.